But I did want to say, like, of all the people whose work I do follow, you have the distinction of being the most misrepresented. So, I mean, congratulations,
Yes.
firstly. Because there's more or less a whole different version of your career online that isn't even yours. And
Right. That's right.
I was just wondering
Thanks.
if,
Thanks for noticing.
yeah, I wondered if maybe that's affected the way you write now. Do you find yourself trying to preempt where people might find something to misrepresent, or do you just accept that's like an inevitable consequence of what you do?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think it has to some degree. To some degree, you're always writing a little defensively when you're writing nonfiction, and especially in any kind of with any kind of academic background, you're at the very least trying to signal that you're aware of the counter arguments to whatever argument you're making, and if you don't really want to rehearse them at length, you still, with footnotes or some other flourishes, you will indicate that you're aware that there are doubts possibly arising in the mind of your reader. But yeah, this is on certain issues. I've just through cruel experience come to realize that these topics are just radioactive. There's just no way to say anything that isn't going to be misunderstood, you often willfully, by a significant percentage of readers, and then your position will be distorted and lied about, or just obscured by all the noise. And it's frustrating because these are, I tend to write. I mean, the most controversial topics tend to be the most socially consequential, and so you're talking about things like the clash of civilizations that I have been worrying about for a while with a significant subset of the Muslim world. But that gets conflated with accusations of racism and desire for to read some of my critics who'd think that I had called for a genocide of all Muslims, or that we should initiate a nuclear first strike on
I
the Muslim world. And
I was very tempted to have my opening question as, so Sam Harris, why did you advocate a nuclear first strike on the Muslim world?
yeah, exactly. So if you can't talk about issues like nuclear proliferation and the logic of nuclear deterrence, and the way in which jihadism and a belief in martyrdom run roughshod over those, without people completely freaking out and saying that it's unethical to even talk about these things. Then the most important things don't get talked about. I mean, there's nothing more important than our figuring out some way to avert the catastrophe of jihadists getting their hands on nuclear weapons. And if we can't even articulate the problem without people losing their minds, then we're doomed. And yet that seems to be what's going on disproportionately in liberal circles, which is especially depressing to me. I mean, one of the things I worry about most is that something terrible will happen, something, let's say, an order of magnitude worse than September 11th, and it's going to seem immediately clear that only our own religious maniacs have the moral clarity to deal with the problem, and then we're just going to have Christian demagogues in the West getting immense power because they're the only ones with steel in their spine who understand what we're dealing with, and I'm afraid that really does seem to be the case once you get on to the left in I'm sure this is the case in the UK, but I can only speak with authority about what's happening in the U.S. Once you get far enough left of center politically, you meet people who cannot make a moral distinction between Israel and ISIS at this moment, or if they can, they make the distinction in the wrong way. They think Israel is worse than ISIS. I mean, and that bespeaks a kind of moral confusion and blindness to the nature of the problem that that I find frankly terrifying. And these are, by and large, educated, well-off people who are confused about these things. And so, yeah, I think the distortions of my work, especially on these subjects, they are frustrating, and they do cause me to write more and speak more and more defensively. But you can only waste so much time anticipating the confusion of a small percentage of your audience. But actually, I think I misspoke there. It's actually on certain of these topics is not a small percentage. It's reliably a majority of the audience, because certain topics are so taboo that just to raise them, you're going to piss off a majority, and certainly, and again, it's very depressing to me that this seems to be among political liberals more than anyone else, because political liberals are right about almost everything, as far as I can tell, except these most consequential things. And I mean, all of their other concerns, a concern for the poor, a concern about wealth inequality, concerns about social justice and equality for all stigmatized minorities, all of this whole suite of liberal concerns are morally enlightened. And then once you start talking about people throwing battery acid in the faces of girls who try to learn to read in Afghanistan, or a group like ISIS, you get just the starkest moral confusion out of these people, and it's very troubling.